At the wedding, my in-laws were clearly intoxicated, but they didn't seem to care. Despite the whispers circulating among the guests, they grew increasingly loud and confrontational. Suddenly, they started yelling at me, saying, "It's too late now that you're married, but if you want to be part of this family, you need to prove you have enough money." They continued, "Your dad is right, so you need to give us $1,000 a month as a bonus." I was stunned by their audacity. I couldn't believe they were making such demands at my wedding reception. I stood there, my face going pale, unable to respond. My father, sensing the tension, grabbed the microphone from them. "Enough is enough. Don't you realize you're embarrassing yourselves?" he said firmly. "My name is Linda, and I'm a 30-year-old office worker. I've been dating Larry, 32, for a year. A friend introduced us after expressing concern about me being single for so long. Although I didn't feel any immediate romantic connection, Larry was persistent and always kind. Over time, his care and attentiveness won me over, and I found myself falling for him. When he proposed, I was ready to say yes. Growing up without my mother, who passed away when I was very young, my father raised me on his own. His hard work and dedication to providing for me meant that I didn't worry much about anything else. Though losing my mother left a lasting pain in my heart, I became cautious about relationships and thought I might never marry. But Larry changed that. He understood my past and promised to always support me, no matter what. His words and his love made me feel like I had finally found someone who truly cared about me. When I told my father about the engagement, he cried with joy. "Wow, Linda, you're finally getting married. I'm so happy for you," he said. I laughed. "Oh, Dad, you're being dramatic." But I could tell how much it meant to him, especially since he'd been the one to raise me on his own. It made me even more excited about the wedding, though I figured we would both probably cry at the ceremony. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind. Both Larry and I were busy with work, so we juggled our jobs and wedding preparations during the weekends. One day, we finally managed to arrange a visit to Larry's parents' house, my first time meeting them. I felt a little nervous, but Larry reassured me. "Don't worry, my parents are very kind." When his mother opened the door, she greeted Larry warmly, but her attitude toward me was noticeably cold. "Aw, you're Linda," she said, her smile fading as she looked me up and down. She led us into the living room, her demeanor still distant. "I'm curious," she said. "What do you bring to the table? Larry is our only child and a treasure. If you're going to marry him, you need to prove you're worthy." Her tone was sharp, and I was caught off guard by the interrogation. I hadn't expected such a cold reception. She continued, "Are you ready to join our family?" I felt a mix of confusion and frustration. Larry's family wasn't royalty or anything like that. It wasn't as though I was marrying into a prestigious family. Why was she making me feel like I had to prove something? I was still trying to process her words when she snapped at me, demanding immediate answers. "Answer me right away," she barked. "You're supposed to support Larry, not just yourself. Don't you know that?" Her harsh criticism took me by surprise. Larry's father intervened, trying to ease the tension. "Sorry about that, Linda," he said. "You must have been startled by my wife's words." I tried to remain calm, figuring his mother might just be nervous. Then Larry's brother entered, and although he seemed kind and calm, he said something that threw me off balance. He smiled and added, "My wife's concerns are actually justified. What worries me is that you come from a single-parent family." I was shocked. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Well, being raised by just one parent doesn't have the best public image," he replied, his words like a blow to my chest. "We can't be too happy to have someone like you become the wife of our only son," they said, and Larry's father tried to explain. I couldn't let it slide. "Hold on a minute," I interjected. unable to stay silent. What's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me on his own. I'm grateful for my upbringing and proud of him. Being raised by one parent doesn't make me any less valuable. The argument continued, with Larry's mother claiming that because I grew up with only one parent, I couldn't possibly know how to be a good wife or do housework. I did plenty of housework to help my father, I responded firmly, and I can cook quite well, too, so, please, don't say that. But despite my response, Larry's mother ignored me and simply said, I'll allow you to marry Larry, but you must promise to devote everything to us because we are his parents. Can you promise me that? I was stunned. What? You know we came here to ask for your permission to marry your son. You do realize what my duties are, don't you? Before I could continue, Larry's father took over the conversation, leaving me little room to respond. Later that night, still troubled by the conversation, I decided to talk to Larry. Larry, do your parents always speak to people like that? I asked. He shrugged. What about it? His indifference shocked me. Well, the way your parents spoke to me, it didn't sit right, I explained. Oh, really? They were just talking about whether you were ready for marriage, Larry said casually. My parents are just concerned about their son's future. I tried to reason with him. I get that they're worried, but I felt like they were being too harsh. Larry didn't seem to understand my discomfort. They didn't say anything wrong. Besides, they gave us their permission to marry. Don't worry about it. I felt uneasy that Larry seemed to side with his parents rather than supporting me. I needed reassurance, but instead, he gave me a hug. You're overthinking it. They're just a little upset because I'm their only son, Larry said. They want us to be as good a couple as they are. It'll all be fine. I understand they might have high expectations for us, I said, though I remained uneasy. But that doesn't give them the right to belittle me for being raised by my father. We're the ones getting married, and we should be the focus, not their approval or disapproval. Larry didn't seem to take it seriously, and although I was still upset, I decided to push his parents' opinions aside and focus on the wedding. The big day arrived, and the ceremony was filled with family, friends, colleagues, and bosses. I walked down the aisle with my father, who had raised me single-handedly. As Larry and I exchanged vows and rings, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. The reception was filled with joy as we greeted our guests, watched videos of us, and celebrated with friends. Despite my concerns about Larry's parents, I was happy I'd decided to marry him. It was a day I would cherish forever. But as the event continued, I started feeling uneasy again. Larry's parents, clearly intoxicated, stumbled around. Their faces were flushed, and they had clearly had too much to drink. Some relatives asked if they were okay, but we had to move forward with the ceremony. Suddenly, Larry's mother snatched my hand away from Larry and yelled at me as though it were a challenge. Listen to me, Linda. After this wedding, you're going to devote yourself to us completely. Prepare yourself, because we're going to test you really hard. The guests murmured, some laughing, unsure whether it was a joke or not. But then, Larry's father grabbed the microphone. Linda, don't you feel embarrassed to wear a dress like that? It doesn't suit you at all, he sneered. You should tell her the truth, he added. My face flushed as I looked at Larry, hoping he would stop his father, but he didn't. Instead, he said, I can't stop them. They're not doing anything wrong. It was then that I realized Larry wouldn't protect me from his parents. He would always side with them. The weight of that realization hit me hard. As the insults continued, my in-laws drunkenly demanded that I prove myself worthy to be part of their family by showing that I had enough money. They went further, saying, after you register your marriage, you need to give us a few $1,000s a month and your entire bonus. I was in shock. I never expected them to make such demands, especially at our wedding reception. I stood there, my face going pale, unable to process what was happening. My father stepped forward, grabbing the microphone from Larry's parents. "Enough of this. Don't you realize you're making fools of yourselves?" he said, still maintaining a sense of respect. Larry's parents shot him a furious glare. "Why are you interrupting us while we're speaking?" I knew this woman's father was no good. "Single parents are never any good," they sneered. I could feel my blood boiling. How dare they insult my father? I couldn't keep quiet anymore. My father, however, remained composed and responded calmly, "You people are worse than I imagined. You won't even meet me because I'm a single father. I never expected someone like you would be involved with President Scott. I always thought his employees were respectable." At that, my father-in-law's face turned pale. "How do you know President Scott?" "He's a business partner of my company and, more importantly, an old friend of mine," my father explained. "And speaking of single parents, President Scott was raised by his mother alone, so you've just insulted the president of the company you work for." Seeing the shock on their faces, I could tell they realized the mess they had gotten themselves into. My father-in-law dropped to his knees. "I apologize, sir. Please don't tell President Scott about this." I could hear laughter from the guests, some even pulling out their phones to record the scene. My father wasn't done, though. "No matter how much you apologize, you can't take back your words." Then he walked over to me and asked, "Do you want to go home?" I nodded, still stunned by everything. I grabbed the microphone from Larry's hand. "Thank you for the great entertainment, but there will be no marriage," I announced to everyone. "I'll make sure to return the money you gave us for this occasion." With that, I walked out of the reception hall with my dad. I caught a glimpse of Larry and his parents, looking devastated, and then the rest of their relatives rushing over to console them. The chaos in the hall must have been overwhelming. Once we returned the money, I apologized to the guests, who expressed their sympathy and praised my dad and me for standing up to such unreasonable behavior. Larry's colleagues, who had attended, quickly spread the word about the incident, and soon, Larry became infamous for having such unreasonable parents. His weak character was criticized, and the embarrassment was so great that he voluntarily resigned. The president of my father-in-law's company soon found out about the incident, and Larry's father was demoted to an insignificant division in a remote office in the countryside. I also heard that Larry's family had been ostracized by all their relatives because of the wedding fiasco. Though it was unfortunate, it was their own doing. Sometimes, these things just can't be avoided. In the meantime, I've been focusing on strengthening my relationship with my dad. We've been spending more quality time together, and I've come to appreciate everything he's done for me even more. One day, he sat me down for a serious conversation. "Linda, are you interested in running the business?" he asked, his expression a mix of hope and seriousness. "Do you mean?" I started, unsure of where he was heading. "Why don't you work toward becoming the president of my company?" he suggested. It was a huge step, but my father seemed to believe I was ready. "I'll do my best," I promised him, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. That was when I decided to focus on my career rather than on romantic relationships. I wanted to prove to myself, and to my dad, that I could excel. Perhaps one day, I could be a great leader like him. Now, I'm fully involved in learning everything I can at my dad's company. The work is challenging, but I find it fulfilling. I'm determined to make the most of this opportunity. Looking back on the wedding fiasco, it's clear that Larry's in-laws were utterly unreasonable, turning what should have been a joyful occasion into a spectacle. Thankfully, since the marriage wasn't officially registered, I was spared from any legal complications. Now that I'm free from any marital ties and the drama with his family, I can focus entirely on my career. It's a relief to know that out of all the chaos, a clear path has opened up for me. I'm excited for what the future holds and am looking forward to leading the company one day. I hope that anyone watching this story can take something valuable from it. Thank you for staying until the end. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed the story, and I hope to see you in the next video.